Common misconceptions regarding lead regulations for public housing authorities, developed by Safe State in collaboration with HUD's Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes. In Alabama, regulations for lead-based paint hazards in housing are enforced by HUD, EPA, OSHA, the CSPC, ADPH, and Safe State. With so many regulations, how can you be sure that you are compliant with them all and keeping your occupants, especially children and pregnant women, safe from lead poisoning? HUD's guidelines for the control of lead-based paint hazards in housing provide the accepted general practices for identifying and treating lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards. They're very extensive. HUD's Office of Public and Indian Housing, in collaboration with the Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes, also develops simplified guidance for public housing authorities. This simplified guidance is titled PIH 11-44. It is important to note that the guidelines are updated regularly, so be sure you are following the most up-to-date guidance. So you may have heard of these guidelines and have some idea of what responsibilities you have, but just in case, let's dispel some common myths that you might believe regarding your responsibilities as a public housing authority. Myth number 1, public housing authorities aren't required to check for lead hazards. This is only true if the housing was constructed after 1977 or has been determined lead-free by a state-certified lead-based paint inspector. It's also exempt if it's for the elderly or disabled or has 0 bedrooms and no children under 6 live or will live in it. In the early 1990s, public housing authorities were required to inspect and conduct risk assessments for lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards in non-exempt housing. If lead-based paint was found, it was required to be treated or removed. If all lead-based paint in your target housing was not removed or permanently treated, ongoing lead-based paint maintenance and reevaluation are required to prevent hazards from occurring. This includes having reevaluations every 2 years and using interim controls on lead-based paint hazards. Myth number 2, public housing authorities have little responsibility for treating lead hazards. In reality, public housing authorities have the largest responsibility to make sure their buildings are safe. Responsibilities include determining the hazards, treating the hazards, verifying that the hazards were treated, and disclosing results of the process to occupants. Myth number 3, the public housing authority will have to pay for all of this out of pocket. In reality, federal financial assistance can be used when removing or permanently treating lead-based paint as required during modernization. Additionally, the Lead-Based Paint Capital Fund program can award competitive grants to public housing authorities in order to identify and eliminate lead-based paint hazards in public housing. Myth number 4, these regulations do not apply to housing that is a part of the Housing Choice Voucher program. In reality, housing choice vouchers are administered locally by the Public Housing Authority. Though the provisions for the program are less extensive and less stringent than for public housing, the Lead Safe Housing Rule and Lead Disclosure Rule both apply to the Housing Choice Voucher program. Requirements for the program include disclosing presence of lead-based paint, identifying and stabilizing deteriorated lead-based paint, and performing annual visual assessments for paint deterioration. For a full understanding of responsibilities, you should review the Lead Safe Housing Rule and the Lead Disclosure Rule. So, did you believe any of these myths? Even if you already knew it all, here are some reasons for you to reevaluate for lead-based paint hazards. It's required by legal bodies and some insurance bodies. In addition, treating lead-based paint and lead-based paint hazards lessens your liability and lowers the risk of lead-based paint exposure to children and pregnant women in your public housing. For more information, go to the Office of Lead Hazard Control and Healthy Homes website at www.hud.gov/lead or contact your local field office.